Hello. So if you've been in the real world or on the internet in the past decade, you've definitely heard of Casey Neistat. You may have heard of him because you saw him flying a car, or because you saw a really cinematic video of him, opening a door, breaking apart a camera, falling off a bike. How are we doing? We're pretty good? Oh, yeah. Totally.
I think we have, it's like 7.5 feet. I'm sorry not to interrupt your intro. You're doing a great job.
Thank you so much, though.
I think we're at 7.5 feet. Okay.
Safety first, then intro. It's cool. Well, in any case, we are here in California in the middle of a pandemic talking about creativity, because the one thing I think we all know about Casey is that the first time we saw a video, we weren't really the same after it. We broke a mold. There was a change, there was a cultural shift, as the teens say. And so today we're going to talk about realizing that creativity and, how he went from a person with a completely different background in filmmaking to this prolific person who has kind of broken every mold he's ever been forced into. So, Casey, welcome.
Akilah, thanks for saying all those really nice things about me.
Yeah, you don't seem at all uncomfortable about me. I'm like, you're not dead. This isn't a funeral where I'm eulogizing you, but I thought I'd say something nice and true. And everyone here is here to realize their creativity. So I think we should jump in first by talking about what being a creator means to you.
Well, mainly because I knew you were going to ask me that question. I've been trying to think in the most simple terms. How do you define a creator? And I have a drawing here because I'm better with drawings than I am with words. But Richie, if you want to punch in on this. So I think that everyone has creativity.
Yeah.
Everyone. Mm-hmm. Everyone in this world has creativity, but there's only a couple people that consider themselves artists.
Right.
And I think in the most simple terms, the difference between everyone with creativity and the artist is this journey right here.
Yeah.
And this is the journey of manifesting your creativity.
Yeah.
Or to say it less romantically, it's like someone who can take their creative ideas and just turn them into something.
Yes.
And
there's a product at the end of it. It's something that they can point to and say, I did something.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think the beauty of living in 2020...
You're finding it.
is, bear with me. The beauty of living in 2020 as a creative individual, as someone who wants to express themselves, is that we have more opportunities in more ways to have that creativity manifest than we've ever had before.
Right. It's funny that you called out to Richie for the close-up of your work, because you actually had a text exchange with him that went really viral on Twitter that I think a lot of people connected to and were surprised by. So I'm just going to read it because I think that this is a good jumping off point. Your tweet was, younger filmmaker wants to help me with videos, and I sent him this note with thoughts on how I approach YouTube filmmaking. So how did you answer, and why did so many people retweet this?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to embarrass him right now because he's sitting right behind the camera. Richie, who's actually filming right now, right there. Richie is like an emerging creator, and we've been working together a very little bit, and he asked me if there were things that I was doing that he could sort of collab with me on.
Yeah.
So I said, sure, take a stab at this. And he sent me a clip of my footage, but edited with glitch transitions and these really fancy titles and all this whoosh,
yes,
and all of these devices layered on there that I don't typically use.
Right.
And my response to him and sort of the ethos of that tweet was, it was just the more stuff that you feel needs to be layered onto a story or a narrative sort of masks what's at the core of that.
Right.
And I think I crassly said in that it's when you go to a great steakhouse, they just serve you the filet on a plate with nothing else.
Right.
When you go to a crappy franchise, it comes covered in sauce with all this garnish and all this not cheese sauce. And it's to hide the fact that the steak isn't very good.
Right.
So for me, my personal style, the thing that I identify with the most is a very pure form of storytelling.
Yeah.
Where the tools you use, whether it's your editing software, titles, filters, anything, the tools that you use are nothing more than a catalyst of expressing that narrative, and shouldn't be the creativity itself.
Do you have any advice for people, I guess, since we're talking about storytelling, on how to figure out the medium, the mode, the, process, what software they would use, when they would employ, color correction or whatever else. Like, do you have advice on how to amplify a story with those things?
How you use software, how you use the tools that enable creative expression today should have sort of a relationship with the content itself.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like I think one of my favorite tech YouTubers, Marquez.
Yeah.
His content, his narrative is about technology. And therefore the tools that he uses, everything from the cameras to the lenses to the actual editing software and how he presents it, is the absolute razor sharp tip of the spear of technology of what's available today.
Yeah.
And therefore I think the kind of perfection that he's able to achieve in his production is a perfect mirror to the technology and the subject matter that he's discussing.
Right.
And now how that translates to someone like me, I like to tell stories about the nothingness of my life. I made a video a week ago about a bar of soap.
Yeah. Before that, there was one about ants.
Yeah, there's one about ants in this very backyard. So for me, it's not about technical flawlessness.
Right.
In fact, I prefer to show my scars.
Yeah.
Today when it comes to expressing their creativity.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you outgrew, the tech that existed at that point, obviously, since you have access to all that stuff now? Or are you still inspired by what people are able to make with whatever they have?
I'm a product of the 90s and early 2000s. And yeah, when I was first finding my footing as a filmmaker, it was the Michel Gondrys, the Spike Jonze, people who were making movies that didn't look like regular movies.
Right.
But they were still in theaters, and they were still in film festivals.
Yeah, and celebrated.
And I always thought that was sort of the only way to win in this space, to be successful in this space. And it was through, I think, myriad twists and turns in my own career, sort of peaking with HBO buying a TV show from my brother and me that we shot on cameras that were not this good. And we edited it in the most primitive editing software because we had no formal knowledge of how to make films.
Right.
So that lack of understanding forced us to develop our own style. That style was something that we always were insecure about, but it turns out the uniqueness of that style is what led an HBO to be interested in it. And I think the product of that was a confidence in no, I don't need to be like what I understood the only version of success was. I can maybe create something new.
Right.
And I think ultimately that's why I shifted so far away from pursuing television and movies and really focused only on posting little videos on the internet.
Yeah, that you have full control over.
Yeah.
That is, your style, that is your personality, that, one day in the future, hundreds of years from now, when the aliens are digging through the rubble, they're like, what is this? This is interesting. If this is not what we've all been watching when it came to media from Earth. So, how do you that? Does that feel good as well? The fact that the aliens will celebrate you.
I hope so. I hope the aliens will celebrate all of us internet videos, social media creators. But I know that I harbor a lot of insecurity.
Okay.
5 years ago, when people were what kind of videos do you make? What kind of movies do you make?
Yeah,
I post them on the internet.
Yeah.
I felt small because of that. And I think as I've matured and gotten older and the entire social media creative space has exploded,
yeah.
I think that so much of culture today is being dictated not by what's on television, not what's in the movie theaters, 2020 movie theaters closed notwithstanding, but it is by these online creators.
Yeah.
And I think something really beautiful and magical that came from that is the tools that were once available only to the most sort of elite spaces. I'm talking filmmaking. You had to go to film school. You had to own the cameras, rent the cameras, get the crews.
Your dad had to be somebody.
Your dad had to be somebody. You had to break through so many barriers just to be that person who was able to take their creativity and turn it into something in this space. And now we live in a world where my daughter, with her 5-year-old discounted, refurbished, $99 off the internet, busted iPad, can record little videos and turn it into something by completely egalitarianizing, by leveling the playing field, by taking this elite art form and making it accessible to the masses we're now seeing like an entirely new generation of creativity being expressed. And that to me is so empowering.
Yeah.
And it's so fair and it's so right. And like, what an exciting time to be a creator.
Yeah. Do you feel that that has also, you know, had an effect on the cream rising to the top, where before it was almost like you want to fit in, right? You want to make the thing that is cookie cutter, that is typical, standard, proven. Now you have people taking chances and leapfrogging over, you know, the people who were destined to make it, who had, you know, the dad and the school and the money to afford a camera and all of those things. Do you feel like that has also, you know, I think impacted culture and made it a richer space?
Yes and no. Like, I think that just because now there are so many more people creating, I don't necessarily think there's that much more great stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I think back to when I was a kid, or like kind of when we were all kids here, like if you're lucky enough to see a dozen movies in a year or 50 TV shows in a year, there were still only a couple that were great.
Right.
And I think that's largely true now. I think that there's still like, you still have to search for really great stuff. I know I spend like 5 hours a day, like just scrolling on various apps.
Same.
And like not interesting. But then there's that one thing that you like blast out to all your friends. It's just so good.
Yeah.
So I think that it's like, just because those barriers to entry have been removed, I don't think it means that it makes it any easier to be great.
Yeah.
I just think it makes it easier to express yourself. Like a good example of that is like, I've always thought of writing as one of the most purest forms of creativity, because all you need is a pen and a piece of paper.
And a thought in your head.
So my whole life I've been trying to write. I've never, ever written anything good.
These are opinions you have about yourself. That's the next video. Is me helping you.
I've never published anything. Like, I've never written anything. Anytime that anything I have written has appeared, it's because somebody smarter than me has helped me with it. Like, I've never figured it out. But I've been able to try.
Right.
And I've been able to, like, give it everything I've got.
Yeah.
And there's, like, a lot that I'm able to take from that. And the idea now that, like, people are able to try and, like, get better through that process, and that is true across all mediums, I think is a really, really great place for creativity to be residing, to live.
You know, we all, I think, grew up in a different world than this. Even the young people who had the internet were always aware of the fact that, like, movie stars and TV people are untouchable. But if you're online, you're kind of like the masses. So when was it that you moved past it? You know, you spoke about the maturity and, you know, starting to maybe appreciate, I think, the process more. But, you know, how do you get over something like that? Because I'm sure there are people watching who are like, well, you know, someone's going to see this and they're going to be the catalyst. You kind of created your own momentum. So how do you, you know, if you don't necessarily have the stamina for a video a day for years, how do you overcome maybe that insecurity?
You know, my answer to that is to just start creating. And I understand, like, that can come across a little bit dismissive, and it's like, it's not a satisfying answer. But, you know, like, what does Malcolm Gladwell say? It takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. To master any creative endeavor, you have to devote 10,000 hours to it. And I think that what social media, what creating photos or videos or design or anything and then sharing it online enables us to do is to be that prolific. If, like, 15 years ago you and I wanted to make a video or make a show or make a movie, what, one a year? If we're really lucky,
exactly, one
if we're
time.
really lucky, you get one shot at it.
And if it's a failure,
then you're done.
Yeah, like, you might as well just move to Mars.
You're
move down
done.
the street, manage a restaurant.
I think now it's like, you know, for someone who wants to overcome their own creative insecurities, here are a million venues. Try something.
Yeah.
And if it's not good, believe me, they'll let you know in the comments.
If it's good and they don't like you, they'll
still let you know in the comments.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, what a great way to find your footing. And I think, like, we've all seen that online so many times. We've seen these creators that ostensibly come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then, like, you go back into their history and they've been posting for 10 years, for 8 years. That's what it took for them to find that confidence within themselves.
Yeah.
And as far as like, you know, the ego of maybe wanting to be on TV, for me, it was like to be on MTV when I was a kid was the ultimate thing.
Same.
I just think that's going away really, really fast.
Right.
Like my kids now, they don't know the difference between television and YouTube. And
no, I mean, I barely do anymore because I'm watching everything on an app that is really just the internet whenever I want to, and you know, paying too much to not see a commercial. So like the truth is, yeah, it is merging, and I think it's merging in a way that this industry didn't expect. Like they assumed, right, that maybe the things that are online would become television. I'm like, no, it's just we consume media all day across platforms, and the quality is kind of indiscernible. So you find what you want to see.
I think that's really true, and like, you know, since Adobe is the one who's enabling us to do this talk, thank you, Adobe. I think that like you look at the products that an Adobe puts out,
right,
and you think about what they enable you to do. Mm-hmm. What was once would take me an entire day to work on, now because of technology, because of these tools to enable creativity, it's now a click.
Yeah.
And every time something like that happens, every time it gets a little bit better, every time like one of these cameras becomes easier to use, it means like the distance between your creativity and your creation gets a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
Jack, we were running the other day and I asked you about this and I said, what are the things that you'd like to see the most? So Jack and I have been working together for like 10 years. He was my intern back in the day and now he's a successful filmmaker in his own right.
Yeah.
But you talked about your biggest. Should I just play the clip?
Play the clip.
I have it on my. This is Jack and I at the top of the mountain. Obstruction, or the biggest obstructions between you and realizing like your creative vision, your films, your YouTube videos, the projects you work on.
The biggest obstruction in life is time, and the amount of time that you can find and squeeze into a day. If your tools are too complicated, it creates an obstruction. And that takes up more and more of your time and makes it harder for you to achieve the things you want to achieve.
How many more miles in your run, Jack?
I could go all day. I could do maybe 4, 5, 6. Which way are we going?
So when Casey was like, we're going to have a conversation really far apart in my backyard, he was like, what's really important is hearing from emerging creators about what they want to, know, how we can help them. Let's make this worth their while. And I would say the most common question that was asked was about how to stand out when the landscape is just so saturated. Everyone's making stuff every day. And, what used to be, one viral video a year that we all knew about is now every 5 minutes. Like, you haven't seen this? So, Casey, do you have advice for people on how you figured out how to stand out and what maybe they can take from that?
I think a lot like if I released like my vlog that I started in 2015, that in 2015 it exploded. Mm-hmm. If I release that now, I think that maybe some people would watch it, but I don't think in a million years it would do now what it did then.
Yeah.
And that speaks to just how saturated and competitive the creative space is.
That you made it.
That's not what I'm saying.
It's his fault. No, it's just everybody did start to figure it out. Right.
Everybody's creating. And I think ultimately what it comes back to is, for me, the best advice I give always is in the simplicity of expression.
Yeah.
Like, rather than focusing on the most complicated way of sharing your creativity, and in my case, like of making a video, of telling a story, what is the most simple way with which you can do that?
Yeah.
And by doing it simply, it strips away the noise and it leaves what is uniquely yours. Mm-hmm. You as the creator, your voice, your perspective, your idea.
Yeah.
The creativity, the creation, that process, the manifestation of the creativity, that is nothing more than a catalyst for getting what is uniquely yours out there.
Yeah.
So that's the advice that, I always give to emerging creators, to young creators, when like kids stop, going surfing and they're like, I'm trying to make videos, what should I do? It's always like, focus on what is uniquely yours.
Yeah.
And what is the most honest, simple, direct way of sharing that idea.
I mean, let's talk about, how that came to be. So you have this prolific vlog. I use the word prolific with no hint of irony. Like, everyone who knows about vlogging on YouTube in the year 2020 knows about it because, they were like, oh, I know that guy who made those vlogs, who broke the mold, who changed all those things. But you set out to make a video every day. And we were talking about the 10,000 hours of becoming an expert. And, I would argue that you became an expert in that time. It wasn't like you went into it like, I did 10,000 hours of this and now I'm going to make a video every day. Like that's where it happened, was in the creating. You set out with a blank slate of just like, let's tape the day and tell the story of it. Like you said, most people's lives are not going to be that in 2020, especially now when we're all stuck at home. So in a world where people are maybe trying to figure out those ideas and how to bring that to fruition, you know, what did you learn in those processes? Like a month into making a video every day, a year into making a video every day, the moment you were like, a video every day is kind of a lot.
Well, I realized it was a lot on day 2. I stuck with it as best I could for 800 days or however long I did it. But and I talk about this in the early episodes 5 years ago, but for me, it was always like these creative barriers that I think anybody, whether you're like a painter or a writer, that we encounter by forcing myself and committing myself to my audience that I was going to constantly post. It would force me to get through that.
Yeah.
So it was like idea, execution, product. And the minute I clicked the upload button, I was right back at the idea. And then I had to figure out how to execute, turn it into a product, and right back at it. And, you know, like, whatever, like the Beatles used to practice together in Germany for like decades before they became the Beatles. For me, like, that's what it was. It was like trying to get better every day. And look, a lot of those episodes sucked. Like, I struggled.
I said, yeah, they were real stinkers. But I think that they were so impressive in the sheer volume that, like, you know, you can have stinkers and people are like, well, tomorrow's a new day.
Right. Like, Alec Baldwin talked about, I think it was Alec Baldwin, but he talked about how he'll best be known not for like the movies that he starred in that he was so excellent in, but for 30 Rock.
Yeah.
Because every week he got to refine his character and see, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How can I make it better? And this comes back to sort of the core of what I think we've been discussing here, is it's just like what these tools have enabled us to do, what technology has enabled us to do. And I mean that holistically, from the cameras that we have on our phones and the cameras we can now reasonably afford, to the software that companies like Adobe put out there, to these distribution mediums.
Right.
You don't need TV anymore. You've got YouTube. You don't need the movie theaters. I mean, you've got TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, we all have access to the tools to create, the tools to distribute in a way we never have before. That you're able to refine yourself and find your voice and figure out what you do best. And, you know, what I did back in the day online with 10-minute videos every day, I think there are now 100 different ways to do that for any individual.
Right.
So how do you find what makes uniquely you, and how do you go through that process of creative discovery? I think it is by being as prolific as you possibly can.
Yeah, all the reps. Just like keep doing it. Yeah. And I mean, you know, I have a question for me as a person who's not especially disciplined. And, you know, I think my trajectory on, you know, creating stuff for the internet was sort of like very stereotypical in the sense that I would make a video and then 6 months later be like, sorry guys, I didn't make a video for 6 months. You know, I think that what people do respect is that discipline, and that you are also a person who runs every day, and you like have these sort of rituals to get you into that creative space. But for people, you know, who like Spike Jonze, I think maybe told you and you told me that he likes having one project. You know, like he likes to work on one thing, spend all of his energy there because he is best utilized to do that, and maybe some different facet of that thing for a year or 5 years, whatever. You know, how do you marry those two things? How do you feel fulfilled when, you know, maybe you're still stuck in that phase where the stuff you're making isn't very good, you're not happy with it, it's not, you know, something that you're necessarily seeing the quickest progress in, but you still know that like this is what you ultimately want to do?
You know, I think that's hard. I think it's different for each person. You know, like Spike Jonze, who I look to as like such a brilliant creative person. He's had such a huge role in my own pursuit. Yeah. He's narrowly focused, is one thing. Yeah. And that's so admirable. And I have the attention span of like a squirrel. And like, if the reason why I could create a video every day is because it was like, it meant every 24 hours I got to have a hard reset and start over. Yeah. So I think it's about figuring out where you fit in there. And like, I know you joke and you say that you put out one video every 6 months, but you do something on Instagram
Right.
where you curate this feed of videos and TikToks that you find funny, and that's every day.
Yeah.
And every day, like, I don't open TikTok. I open Akilah's Instagram feed to watch the Akilah Hughes highlight reel of TikTok. And, like, that's a creative contribution I find incredibly satisfying.
I appreciate that. I
So-
would say my taste is most of it.
But the point being is, like, sure, there's something as heavy as creating a video from nothing, and then there's something as light as just sharing things that you find
Right.
interesting. But absolutely, the cross-section of what you find interesting is very revealing about your own creative perspective. And that's what I mean by this idea of, like, we are now confronted with so many different means of expressing our creativity that, like, now is the ultimate time to be someone who wants to go. I think I can wrap this up, Akilah, with my drawing.
Oh my gosh.
Who wants to go from just being one of the many who has creativity,
Yeah.
all of us, to being someone who's able to express that creativity in a way that might connect with others.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, we've had a great conversation about creativity, realizing it, the name of the talk, and also just like the realities of the world in a very different, creative playing field where everyone has these same tools, right? And the way we use them is the real difference maker at this point. The ways that we can find to innovate with all of the same things. And so you are a person who goes hard, works hard, but when you do need to pull back and, you're too close to a project or you're just a little burnout, which I think we all can agree has happened a lot lately, how do you consciously sort of watch things or find inspiration through other people's work? Because I do think that, the way you found your style, was obviously through a lot of trial and error. You're the most hands-on person I've ever met. But I think also you are inspired by people who had the same sort of ethos, right? People who were just out there doing it. So if I'm somebody sitting at home who's, Gen Z, supposed to be in college right now, but things are a little wonky, and I want to be making stuff, but I'm tired, what would you say helps you find creativity again?
That's tough. I think that there is, because there's just such a extraordinary amount of content out there. I think one of the greatest virtues, one of the greatest things to come from, a lot of bad stuff too, don't get me wrong, but like one of the greatest things to come from the fact that we are now at a place where what was once an unattainable or out of reach kind of art form is now available to most.
Yeah.
It means that people are expressing themselves from all kinds of walks of life.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that's exciting to you, you know what? It's exciting to someone else. So put that out there.
Yeah.
Don't conform. Focus on what makes you you. Focus on what makes you interested in that thing and share that.
Yeah.
That's a great place to end this.
It was. I loved it.
Adobe, thanks for making this happen. Akilah, thanks for...
Thank you for having me. This is lovely. This is the only fun thing I've gotten to do in months. So, yes, thank you for having a wide enough table for this to really happen.
Yeah, thanks for being cool with staying...
I'll grab the little thingy.
Yeah.
You're still safe. We're still
It's
safe.
7 feet.
Yeah.
It's 7 feet.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that was great.
Thank you.
All right, Akilah, on to the next project.
Yes, on to the next.